are clearly blessed. They sow some big seed, he takes care of the rest. Thousands of creaseless suits, a sea of huge hats, nodding and waving, pat themselves on the back. Their 7-bedroom home, drive to the church they call the Superdome. Singing and dancing, arrow stroking begins, tithing to buy him their favorite thing. Smiles and muscular jaws, hide from exposure the slightest flaws. Broadcast on TV, his cliche boy, twisting the scriptures, his delight and joy.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Sunday Night Live at Jonny Lipsham Studios with me, Jonny Lipsham. And there's quite a lot of chat going on tonight. It's proper hilarious, I have to say. So I'm going to address the first question of the night. I'm going to get in there nice and early. Excuse me, I still have my cough cold thing going on. It's annoying. So, and it's actually She Studios, that's my good friend Sheila, who has the first question of the night, and she's asking about kilts and what we wear as Scots, what we wear under our kilts, and what you've heard, it's true. You are quite correct. So there you go. So I hope I've cleared that one up for you. Yes, it is absolutely true. Not sure about the whole jeans thing though, but certainly kilts, yes, that is the traditional way. Lollipop Girl says, if it's able, I would imagine that would be how things... There you go. And Johnny says, not the answer I expected. Yes, Sheila, you have heard correctly. That is the traditional way to wear a kilt. So there you go. Does not necessarily mean that every Scot follows the tradition, however. Some do, some don't. I will leave to your imagination whether I do or don't. But there we go. Lollipop Guild says, us US lassies haven't had the opportunity to chat for ourselves. Wow. You guys are hilarious tonight. So there we go. How do we go from there? Or where do we go from there? Is possibly the question, really. So anyway, good evening, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. It seems that it's pretty windy over there on the other side of the Atlantic. And it has been pretty windy here as well today. Certainly the last few days it's been pretty wild. But yeah, so I hope you guys are all okay, and I believe some of you still have snow on the ground, which is quite amazing. And I've had some pretty wild weather, especially down in Kansas. I have heard some of my friends down in Kansas have been talking about tornadoes and stuff, and tornado warnings. So if you are in that area, then certainly I would say do everything you can to keep safe. Let's see. 75 mile an hour winds here in Chicago. Yeah, my sister was saying that as well today. That it's been pretty gusty. Bobby Booth says, not here, been clear and warm. Nice. Kyle says, we can get snow past Easter Sunday. That's awesome. Alrighty, folks. So, good evening. I hope everyone is well, and I am repeating myself, so I will stop doing that now. What a great start to the show. Yeah, you guys have totally thrown me with all the kilt talk and everything else. So, so there we go. So tonight's subject is we're going to be talking about mixing templates and whether you should use them or not. Are they useful? Are they not useful? And how to set them up. And actually in Studio One they're fairly easy to set up, particularly if you're doing an album where it's by and large the same instrumentation. Then a template can be useful because it means you don't have to keep on setting up the same things in your session every time. So it saves some time. Some people prefer to set them up. They just like to that's part of their kind of due diligence. They just like to make sure that everything's set up, so they do that every session, and it doesn't really bother them. But some people like to have all of their buses and everything else already created with, certain plugins that they use every time to be set on those bus channels ready to go. And who's to say that that's not actually more efficient? I think it's possibly a personal preference thing. I tend to do it both ways, to be honest. I tend to, sometimes I'll have a template and sometimes I won't. Sometimes I just like to set stuff up, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's more hassle than it's worth to set things up, especially if you have a lot of channels. If you're working on a project where you have 80, 90, 100 channels on your mixer, I would say it's a good idea if you're going to be doing several songs using that many channels and lots of buses and sub-buses and buses nested into buses. It's a good idea to have a template set up for that because it will take a long time every time to set something like that up. So that's a good idea. And especially if, your band is tracking live. So, everybody is in the same room or in separate booths, but they're all recording together at the same time, and the plan is to cut maybe 5 or 6 songs in a day, then definitely it is a terrific idea to have a template, because it means you can just open a new session and all your buses and your channels and everything else are ready to go, and you can just hit record on the next song. You just title it and hit record. So definitely it's a good idea. Now Studio One does have a whole bunch of templates that you can make use of, and you can adjust and tailor to your needs, or you can use the first song as a template. And then you would basically just save a new version or save as, and then title it as, I don't know, XYZ album mixing template, and then remove all of the audio files from the pool and from the arrange view, and then you have all of your channels and all of your buses and everything else set up ready to go, and your template is thus created. So and then you can just open that up every time. So when you go to a new song, you open with a template rather than with the empty song. So that can certainly work. I have one template that I do use all the time, and I will show you that this evening because it's just really quick. And I use this for when I'm mixing voiceover stuff for audiobooks and that kind of thing. So I will show you that, and everything is set up how I like it. Even if it is only 2 or 3 channels, it doesn't really matter to me. It's just there and it's ready to go. So I will show you that. But I will also show you my system that I have, my busing system, and everything routed and stuff, how I like it for mixing as well. Because that you might find that useful as well and helpful. And so, yeah, so that's what we're going to look at tonight. And I hope that you find it useful. Just Bob is here, and he's just popping in for a few. He's helping his wife with dinner. And he hit the like button. Good man. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And Sheila says, what are your top 5 frequently used plugins? That is a great question, and I will get to that in just a wee minute, okay? But please hold that. Jonny says, Jonny Guyver's here. Hey, Jonny. He says, for me, they are as follows. Channel strip, mix for beat delay, multiband dynamics, and limiter. And those are your ones that you most often use. Okay, cool. I will take a look at that. Thank you, Kyle, for posting that there are 23 people watching. That's fantastic. If somebody could just keep track of that, I appreciate that. All right, so let's get into this, folks. Let me go over to this view here. And I have this song open, which we will talk about in just a minute. This is kind of my mixing template, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I'll show you my other template. I go back to the start page, and once you've created a template, and we will actually create a dummy template for this session as well, so you can see how to do that. When I go into create a new song, this is what comes up. You get these styles and you get interfaces, which is templates created for pretty much every PreSonus interface audio device that they make. And then you have this user tab here. So in this case, I have Empty Song and King's Sermons, and this is the one that I use for sermons for my church, because I put the church sermons up on the church website, and we have like intro and outro pieces as well that go with that. So I like to keep that handy. So I will show you that. So let's say I'm going to do a new song with that template, and it's got a little description box down the bottom here. Will it let me? Yes, there you go. Sermon audio track with bookends track for intros and outros. And you can, when you create your new template, you can describe it. There's a dialog box which I'll show you in just a minute as well. And because it's just voiceover audio, it's just voice audio. There's no music really involved, so I don't need this set in bars. I just set that up as seconds. Tempo doesn't really matter too terribly much. And sample rate is 44.1 because that's the sample rate that I receive the audio tracks from the church. And then everything else is just fine like that. So then I hit OK. And this comes up because there is a piece of audio that is missing. because historically, I think when I created this template, a piece of audio got left behind, and then I deleted it, and then deleted it from the pool, or rather deleted it from the original file so that it is not found in the pool anymore. So this is it, folks, and it's essentially just 2 channels and a bus all set up ready to go, and that's pretty much how I like it. Now, what I could do with this template is I could add some plugins to it that I use all the time. So I think I will do that. Now, it will mean that this template will load up a little slower. So I will show you that as well. So I would normally on this, I would normally have a de-esser. So let's grab my de-esser and we'll put that in first slot there. And I'm not going to dial it in because I've not got any audio. And I would also have the limiter on the post here. And I would also have a limiter on my bus. And I would also have the Pro EQ. Let's go get that guy. And we'll stick that after the de-esser. And that's it. That's that one set up. So now that I've done that, I can go to File. And I can go Save as Template. And I can call this, let's say, I will call this King's Sermon, and it will probably ask me to overwrite it. King's Sermons, new King's Sermons template. And we'll keep it like that, and we'll go OK. And then now that is saved as a template. And what I can do now is I can go, I think I don't need to save it. I think I just go close. And then I go no. And then I think when I go to start and I go create a new song, there's my new template. So I can now click on that. I can make sure that is set to seconds. I would prefer if it defaulted. I don't know why it doesn't default with this template to seconds, but it doesn't. And then I hit OK and it loads up and it does do that again. But look, my DS and my Pro EQ and my 2 limiters are in place. And now doing a sermon, editing and preparing a sermon for upload to the website is a heck of a lot quicker. And it's as simple as that, really, creating a template. You just create some audio tracks and a bus and put in plugins that you think you are always going to use. Now, in some cases, that might be something like the SSL e-channel channel strip across all of your tracks. Say you've got, you think your band is like 8 or 9 piece, but you've got like 10 mics on your drums and then another sort of 7 or 8 or 9. So basically you've got like 20, 30 channels of audio going on in your session, and then you bus all of those together. And that's pretty much your standard template. You put your SSL channel strip across all of those, and then you do save as a template. And there's your album recording, your album mixing template, just like that. And it, the job is done. All you need to do then is just pull in your audio files and you're good to go. You can start mixing right away. So templates do speed things up. I have no doubt about that. I'm going to close this now because we don't need that one. Okay, so I will talk a little bit more about... Rainer says you use a new interface. Yes, the 1824C. Yes, I do, and I love it. It's an awesome piece of gear. I highly recommend it. Just Bob asks, is the Dso Vst a free plugin? No, that's where is it? It's up here somewhere. No, these are my Plugin Alliance plugins. The SPL DSR is not quite free. I think I got it for $25 actually, because it was on a deal. I seem to recall, and it comes as a 2-pack. So you get this one, you get this dual band de-esser, and then this regular single band de-esser. And they're both pretty awesome, to be honest. I use this dual band one on cymbals and maybe to get rid of guitar squeak, and then this one I use on vocals mostly. But I'll use it on anything that needs highs tamed. And they work really, really well. So yeah, these are all my Plugin Alliance plugins. I picked up some bundles that cost me very, very little money when they were on offer, so I thought I've got to have those. So there you go, and they just give me some extra options. Jonny says the Studio One gate has a great de-esser. It certainly does, and the compressor as well. You can set the compressor, just the regular compressor up as a nice de-esser as well. If I park that in here, you can use the internal sidechain filter to find your frequency for your S-ing. So let's set this up at about, 6K, and then you pull the threshold back, and you would set this pretty aggressively because you want the S's to be reduced quickly, so you have a fast attack and a fast release. And I wouldn't use the makeup gain. And I'd probably pull this back quite a bit because I want the S's to be pretty sharply reduced by quite a lot, so maybe 10, 12 dB. And that's just a dead easy way to do it. And a good way to dial it in is if you use this listen filter button here. You switch that on, and what that means is you are now listening only to what the compressor is listening to. And with this low cut set at 6K, basically the compressor is only listening to anything above 6K. So you can really dial in this low cut and the high cut until you've got the exact spot where the S's in that particular piece of audio sit. So it might be that they're between 6.5 and 7.25K, in which case that's fine, because you can set both of these up to do that, and then you're listening to exactly where the S's are, and then you can turn that off once you've dialed it in, and then you can dial in the threshold to get the correct amount of gain reduction, and it works pretty well. Before I got any third-party DSs, that's what I did. I mean, for my EP in 2016, that's exactly what I did. So I hope that helps you. Some good questions there, though. Doesn't the compressor have a DSer setting? Yes, it does. I saw reviews about Jonny Garvin. It sounded great. Yada, yada, yada. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about this particular template that I am using. And this is all set up actually for some videos which I'm going to be doing over the course of the next several weeks, where I'm going to mix my song Paper Deity from my EP in 2016, and I'm going to mix it from scratch. It's been about 3 years since I've touched the song, so it's going to be quite fun to revisit and do a brand new 2019 fresh mix of this song. Now, when I mixed it the first time, I limited myself to just the Pro EQ, the compressor, the beat delay, and the room reverb. I limited myself to just those 4 plugins for this song. In fact, for the whole album, and the limiter. Which I used the limiter in mastering. I didn't use it in mixing at all, but I certainly used it in mastering. So, but just for mixing, I only used those 4 plugins, and that was kind of a deliberate challenge to see if I could actually mix a whole EP and make it sound wonderful with just those 4 plugins. And I think we got that result. I think the mixes do sound wonderful, even though I am saying so myself, and they are my mixes. I think they were extremely good mixes. And Just Bob is on his way for dinner. Enjoy your dinner, my friend. Good to see you. Thanks for dropping in. Deer Creek asks, how frequently would you use a DS on something other than vocals? I've used a DSer on cymbals. I've used them on guitars. to get rid of guitar squeak when moving from one fret to another. Not every guitarist does it. A lot of guitar players don't squeak, but some do. And it's, in some cases, it might be the strings are a little old, and that's why that happens. So I would use a de-esser in those situations. Sometimes there are certain high frequencies in cymbals that you just want to tame a bit so that they are nice and bright sounding, but not harsh. And it's the harshness you want to tame down whilst retaining the brightness, and using a de-esser will do that for you rather than an EQ. Okay, so let's get back to this this template here. And this is a template. I set this all up, and then I brought in my stems from my original mixing sessions. As you can see, everything's brightly colored, and I made sure the tenor sax was bright, garish pink for two reasons. One, I think my tenor sax player at that session was wearing a pink shirt, so I thought, hey, I remembered that. And also, it's the only channel that is pink. So it's a solo instrument, so it has a bit of a feature, so I thought, let's give it a feature color as well. You don't have to do that. It's just the way I do things. And as you can see, I like to use different shades of blues and yellows, and occasionally greens, like these horns are greens. But actually, more often than not, I have my guitars green. I don't tend to have like fixed colors that a lot of people have in their mixing sessions. You know, some people have, right, guitars are always green because G for guitar, G for green, or drums. There's no color that begins with D. What are we going to do there? So you know what I mean. So some people have specific colors. Drums are always red. Guitars are always green. Vocals are always yellow. Keyboards are always purple. Some people have that so that things are just quickly identifiable. I don't necessarily go down that route. I do group things according to instrument type, and therefore they have the same color. Like the lead vocal is a brighter yellow than the backing vocals, but they're all yellow. The trumpets are green here, and the keyboards are this kind of dark blue purple thing here. Then my guitars are kind of this, I have no idea what color that is. And then the drums and percussion are blue. Kind of a light kind of sky blue color. But, you know, next time I mix a song, the drums might be purple or brown. You know, to me, it just depends. I like to change it up sometimes. So anyway, let's get back to the mixing template itself. So I have everything routed to buses. So I have lead vocal buses for these two here, then backing vocal buses. Even if I have a single instrument, it still has a bus. I'll explain why that is in just a minute. Then the trumpet and tenor sax have their own bus called the horns bus. Then we have the Hammond and the Rhodes going to a keys bus. 3 guitars go into a guitar bus, bass bus for the bass guitar, even though it's on its own. See, oftentimes, if I have 2 tracks for the bass, like if I have a DI track and an amp track, they will both go to a bass bus. But that doesn't always happen. Even if it's just a single track, it still goes to its own bass. It goes to its own bus, rather. And then drums and percussion. Drums are going to their own bus, and percussion goes to its own bus. And here is my busing system, which are always red. My buses are always red. I'm not sure how that developed, but it just did. I think when I started using Studio One version 2, this is where kind of like the whole buses must... you know, the fact that the buses back then were kind of like this darker shade of grey, and I thought, they definitely stand out. You can't miss the fact that those are bus channels. And so when I came into Studio One 3, and you could make a certain set of channels a certain color, I thought, hey, I'm just going to make them red. And it kind of stuck. I don't know why. But that's what I do. My buses are always red. And then I have a set of parallel buses so that I can do parallel compression. Now, I could cheat, and I could have my parallel compressors all set up on my parallel buses ready to go. but I don't. I could do, but I don't. Now, these are all set up and nothing is routed to them at all. These are just bus channels that have nothing sent to them at all. And what I will do as I go through the mix is these individual channels will get pre-fader sends to to my parallel buses over here. The reason why they're pre-fader sends is because I want to be able to adjust my fader levels on my channels over here as I mix my song and be able to send full 0 dB level signal to my parallel channels, not affected by what the faders are doing. So there's no kind of relative relationship between the two. It's just a direct copy, basically, and that's how I like to set. That's how I like to set everything up. Now, will I use these parallel buses? Yeah, depends. Some songs I do, some songs I don't. Songs that are more rock orientated, I will use a lot of parallel compression. Tunes that are more, maybe straight ahead jazz orientated, so maybe bebop orientated, I will not use any parallel compression at all. So I will not be using my parallel buses for that. And if it is a jazz song, or a folk song or a classical piece that I'm mixing, these will all just get deleted out of my template because I won't need them. And I will just use my regular busing system. So what do I do with my busing system? Well, this is really where I start mixing. And I think I've done a video on I think I called it My Approach to a Mix, which is pretty much, it's a little bit old now, maybe needs updated a little bit because I didn't really talk about parallel compression in that other video. But pretty much where I start is over here on the main output, the master fader, the mix bus, whatever you want to call it. And I usually start with just a little bit of compression, not a lot. We're only talking maybe half a dB to 1 dB. And I mix through that compressor. So that compressor is the first thing that goes on, and maybe an EQ, and I will mix through that EQ and through that compressor and through a tape machine. So I'll have a two-track tape machine simulator on here, and the whole shebang, all the mix gets done through those plugins. And then the next thing I do is I set up a static mix with my channels, and these guys will be out of the equation at that point. I'm not really thinking about these, so these will just remain at 0 dB. And the parallel channels would be turned down to 0. And then I get to setting up a static mix with just the faders and these little pan sliders. And then once I'm happy with that, then I will go and I'll start to dial in EQ and compression overall on my buses. And then once I've dialed that in and everything sounds really, really, really kicking, and I'm close to considering my mix finished, then I will go and I'll have a look at individual channels and see if anything needs finessed. And this is all before I've even started thinking about reverbs and delays. Reverbs and delays are the last thing that I deal with in a mix. And a lot of the mix gets done with this guy switched on. The reason being is that although my final result is always a stereo output, I mix with the mono button engaged so that I can gain better separation between all of the elements, because when you are in mono, all of the elements are collapsed on top of each other in mono. So if I have like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 guitar parts, I want to make sure that each one of them is completely separated. And so the best way I can do that is stick this mono button on. All those guitars are now on top of each other, and now my challenge is to use EQ and compression alone to get each one of those guitar parts separated so that I can hear every single one of them, all 9 or 10 of them, however many guitars it happens to be, depends on the song. And then once I've done that, and I've done that with all the elements of my mix, and I can hear every individual channel completely separated in mono, and it sounds great, then boing, we go back into stereo. And that's when I start getting to ambient effects such as reverbs and delays and that kind of thing. And then the final phase of the mix is, if the song requires it, parallel compression. And then I will get to sweetening the mix with some automation, some creative stuff. This is where I get to have fun. You know, that last sort of 15% of the mix. For me, that's the real fun part. I've done all the hard work, and now I can have fun with this. I can move elements from one side of the mix to the other. So, you know, I could have like a synth pad that just sweeps across from left to right and right to left. I've done that recently on a couple of songs for a client, and it really made the difference creatively with that song, where otherwise that was a static element in the mix, and it just made a great effect that keeps the listener engaged. And of course, volume rides with the vocals and that kind of stuff, and you know, moving things up, forward, and moving things back when they need to be. Like, for example, in this song, tenor sax solo, I would maybe give that a little bit of a lift in the solo and then back it off when it's just kind of sitting behind the lead vocal, that kind of stuff. Hammond organ plays pretty much a color role, so throughout the song. So again, there would be automation going on this. So I would, you know, have a little phrase poke out, and then it sits back, and then another little phrase poke out, and then it sits back. So I do that with volume rides, use my fader port, that kind of stuff. And then that's the mix done. And so that's how I use a template like this. So I created this template and created my channels and named them all and all of that. And then I brought the stems into this after the fact. So these stems were sitting in a folder over here, and then I just dragged them in and lined them up. So this is not even touched. I have not started this yet, but this is what is going to be coming up over the course of the next several weeks, starting on this Thursday. The first video in this series will go up on Thursday, so watch out for that. And I will go over getting this mix started. We will take care of the basics to start with, like gain staging, that kind of stuff, and getting everything set up. And then we will get into it, and we will actually mix this week by week. I'm going to make the stems available to everybody. So on this Thursday, when you watch the first episode, in the description of that video, you will find a link to the Dropbox folder where you can get the stems to this song, Paper Deity, and you can mix along with me, or mix at your own pace, and you have my permission to use the song in your portfolio as well to attract clients. You can say, hey, I've mixed this song by Jonny Lipsham, and people will get to hear how you deal with this particular style, this particular type of song, and it does have some issues, this song, which you'll be able to demonstrate your skill in overcoming those issues. So I heartily recommend that you come and watch this and mix along with me. I think it'd be a great thing. So, okay, let's go into your questions, because we've got about 15 minutes left. Let's see. Let me scroll up and see if I can catch the questions. If my darn thing will let me flipping scroll, which it's not at the moment. Come on, scroll. Let's see. On the templates, if you are primarily a MIDI composer, how would you go about setting up a template that keeps works to a minimum? Would you set up song sections, instruments with presets and channel effects? That's a great question. I don't primarily work with MIDI. I'm mostly an audio guy, but as you can see, well, you can't actually see with this particular session, but sometimes I do work with some virtual instruments like Presence XT, though, and some native instrument stuff. But I don't tend to, they don't tend to play a massive role. Like, I'm not I don't have like 20 channels of contact or, the East-West symphony library or anything like that. So I'm not like extensively a MIDI kind of person, but I do use some MIDI tracks. How would you go about setting that up? I would suggest that perhaps you create instances of the virtual instruments that you would be using regularly. Let's say for a whole album you're going to be using the same kind of instruments. Maybe create instrument tracks with them set up already on it. And have that as part of your template. Now the thing is, the more stuff you add to your template that needs to load into your template, the longer the template will take to load up. So there's that to bear in mind as well. So if you've got a lot of VST instruments that are going to be loaded up into your template, or a lot of plugins that you're likely to be using from the get-go, right from the start with a project, then bear in mind that if you have all of those starting up on your session, those things have to load in. So it will take a longer time for your new song with that template to load up. Okay, so just bear that in mind is all I would say. But you could pretty much add whatever you want to your template. You can have as much going on as you wish. You can have VST set up. You can have EQs across all of your channels set up. You can have the VU meter across every channel set up if you really want. You can do that. You can have all of your mix bus processing all in place. I probably should do that because that's where I start my mix. I should probably always have my EQ and my compressor and my tape machine set up so that when I start a session, those are there because that's where I start my mix. That would make sense to me. But, by the same token, I don't like to have everything set up. Some people do. Some people know that they're going to be using an SSL channel strip across everything. So their mix template would have that loaded in on every channel. If that's the way you work and that's kind of how you mix, then have that so that when you open a new session with that template, those things just load in straight away and then you're good to go. So you can pretty much set it up with anything you want. Bobby says, I don't think it works for old joints. I'm not quite sure what you're going on about there. So yeah, so I hope that answers that question. Deer Creek says, I wish there was an option to adjust track width other than just the two settings. I've not seen a DAW that has the track width option to be able to drag to preferred size. Jonny says, sadly there isn't, but it is a good feature request. Yep, I would agree with that. If that's something that particularly troubles you and you would like to always be able to choose how wide or how narrow to have your channels, other than kind of the preset ways that we have right now, which I agree. It's kind of a little bit limited. It's kind of that or that or that. Yeah, it's kind of, I suppose, maybe a little bit limiting, maybe. But as far as I see, when you're bringing plugins into your inserts or to your sends, I don't think it matters too terribly much to me. However, if you're in this view, it's going to be a little bit harder to, you'd have to double click a channel like I have here to open it up, and then you put your inserts in, and then once you've got your inserts in, double click to close it again. So it would mean you'd have to do a lot of double clicking. I suppose that's the drawback of this view here. However, the cool thing about this view is that when you play the track, all your metering is at the top here instead of down in the little channel base. So yeah, there is that. You can shrink that down, and you can open this little door and the insert and send section pops out like that. Yeah, that's quite fun. I prefer to have it like this, really. And I suppose that's a little throwback for me to my Cubase days when the mixer was kind of like this a little bit. And, you know, Pro Tools is a little bit like this as well. So, you know, I used Cubase and Pro Tools relatively extensively. So this, for me, I suppose, is my kind of, hey, this is just familiar territory to me. Doesn't matter too terribly much to me because, you know, I come from mixing on consoles. Essentially, that's where I got my start. So you kind of like, you had everything kind of laid out vertically anyway. So, and it's all, you know, every channel is an exact same width. So, you know, consoles are consoles. And so for me, this is kind of like, this is just how it is. And it doesn't really bother me too terribly much. But I do agree it is a good feature request and well worth putting that one in. I would agree. Even a fill screen option would be nice, like you can with the event area. Yeah. I mean, you can kind of do that. You can grab this and, you know, drag it right to the top like that, which is fine if you've got like 50 or 60 plugins on each channel, which I wouldn't recommend. But, you know, you could. Or you could kind of like have everything completely collapsed down. I kind of go for, you know, kind of there-ish. And, you know, if ever I needed to put in, you know, any more plugins, like if I needed like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 on a guitar channel for whatever reason, then I would just make this a little bit taller. It's, you know, not a big deal to me, but I can see why you might think it might be a good one. Okay, let's go back over here and let's go back and look at your questions a little bit more. And I'm trying not to miss questions. Okay, we're talking about DS's up there, so I've caught up with that. Deer Creek says, I use colors for best contrast. Yep, that is definitely a good idea. Rainer's saying to Jonny that he would like to translate your beginner tips to German. That's cool. Bobby says, I make mine a light blue so that I could read the writing on them so that I can group them. That's a really good point, Bobby. I'm glad you raised it. And I'll explain why that's a really good point. So I'm going to go back over to Studio One. And this is one of the things that changed with version 4 of Studio One. And it was one of my bugbears about Studio One 3. Is in Studio One 3, all of these channel titles at the bottom of your channels, in what would be, I guess, the scribble strip area, it was always black. The writing was always black. Now, in some cases, this didn't jive well with the colors. If you go watch some of my older videos on Studio One version 3, you will notice that whenever I went to a red channel, it had black writing, but the black writing was blurred or appeared blurred because there was some kind of unpleasant phasing going on between this particular red color and the text, the black text. Didn't look good. And for me, it was hard on the eyes for certain colors to be, for the text to be black with those colors. And the cool thing about Studio One 4 is that now, when the GUI thinks that it's a good idea to have white on a certain color because the contrast is better, then it does. So note these ones here are black, that one is black, but on these green channels here for the trumpet and tenor saxophone, it's white, and then on the Hammond and Rhodes it's white. A lot of these are white here. The bass, it's black text. The drums and the overheads channel are white. Percussion is black. All my buses are white, which is perfect for me because now I can read all of those and there's no blurring. And then my brown parallel buses, it's all black. And to me, these are ideal. These are ideal. They've got the contrast just right with all of that stuff. I was very pleased when they did that, to be honest. But that's a really good point and very well made as well. Dickory says the screenshot looks a little dark to me. Especially the white text, hard to read. That's interesting. I find that the opposite. I find the white text on the colors to be much easier to read. And I say that being, in kind of like the less than 0.5% people in the world who are fully colorblind, which is what I am. My world is a sepia kind of world. Everything is kind of, I don't know, sepia is probably the best way I can describe it, but that's only because I explained what I see to a photographer, and the photographer said, "Oh, so your world is kind of sepia-like." I said, "I don't know what that means," and so he explained what sepia is, and I go, "Yeah, that pretty much describes exactly what I see." So that's pretty much my world. So when I'm looking at anything, including the Studio One screen here, all the colors are, they're not colors to my eyes. But I think I've talked about this before, that I have a condition called synesthesia, which basically means my brain, because it has this deficiency where it doesn't interpret color properly, so another part of my brain fills in that gap. And so I have this very strange sensation whereby I hear the colors. It's hard to explain, but there are some people who taste music. They might be tone deaf, and because they're tone deaf and they can't differentiate between the different pitches, their brain compensates for that, and they can taste the different pitches. Go figure. I don't know how this works, but the brain is an incredibly complex and wonderful thing, and clearly the brain just develops ways to compensate so that you can understand the information that your eyes and your ears are receiving somehow. So that's the colors, which is why I can say, hey, these are yellow, that's pink, these are green, these are kind of purple, and then there are a couple of colors here that I couldn't really identify. I wasn't really sure what they are, because I couldn't really describe them to you because you wouldn't understand. So yeah, so I'm going to kind of disagree with you on that one there, Chris, if you don't mind. Raina says, "Thank you. I know so many who like your work but don't understand." Yeah, that's true. Let's see. And funny about the pink stuff. Yes. Jonny most likely doesn't have the text contrast high enough. Possibly. You're possibly right there. Like I said, I just kind of set it to the point where I could read it and just kind of left it really. Deer Creek says, "I actually dislike sessions with so many tracks. At that point, I'm dragging over to 2 monitors. Too much to digest, I guess." Well, the cool thing there is you can set up scenes in your mixer. And so if you only want to see your audio channels, you can. Or if you only want to see certain of your audio channels, you can. If you want to just deal with your guitars, you can set it up so that all you have on your screen is just the guitars. Or you only want to deal with vocals. That's something you can very easily set up. Or just do drum mix. So you can mix by groups if you wish. I know a number of mix engineers that do that. They call them buckets on their console. Buckets of 8 channels. Chris Lord Algie is one of those that does that. So he will mix 8 channels at a time. And his whole new plugin, his MixHub plugin, is based around that concept. So you can do that. You can absolutely do that on the Studio One mixer. Definitely worth having a look at that. Woodbeast is here, and he's greeting everybody. Good to see you, Woodbeast. Thanks for coming. Is there a hide show tracks in Studio One? Yes, there is. Sheila, if you're still here and you're still watching, I can show you that. Let's go back to Studio One, and I can show you that with this template here. You have to go over to this extreme left-hand side here, and you hit the channel list button here. And if you only want to see your audio channels, See, I've got buses and audio channels enabled because I don't have any effects channels and I don't have any instrument channels on here at this moment. But if I only want to see my buses, I can go bye-bye. And now all I have is my buses and my parallel buses. So those are the only things that are sat in the mixer right now. As you can see, all the audio channels are hidden. Now, if I was to turn those on and get rid of the buses, now I just have just my audio channels. And as you can see, there are only 18. So it's not too big a deal to scroll. But let's say, oh, and you can actually turn everything off as well. There you go. So if you want to just focus on your mix bus, you can just process your mix bus without any distractions over here, and then you can turn those on. So let's get everything turned back on. And let's say what we want to do is we want to ignore the parallel buses for now. So we can hide all of those just by clicking and dragging. And now they are out of the mixer. And all I have is my buses and my my audio channels. Now, because I've done that, if I get rid of my audio channels, now I'm just left with just my buses. So when I start a mix, I could do this. I could work like this. I don't currently, but I could. Because I explained earlier that I start with my mix bus and then I go to my buses and I mix from here, I could so totally do this and just have just these on display because these are the ones that I want to see. And, you know, the parallel buses I would come back to later. And then as I progress through the mix, I could bring these guys in. Let's get these back involved. There we go. So now that's everything back involved in the mix. But let's say all I want to do is just focus on the vocals and nothing else. That's fine. I click on the last channel here, drag all the way up, and now all I have is just my vocal channels, and I can keep it like that. And you can use this little plus and minus button down here, which is what I was talking to Chris about. If you use these buttons here, you can add and see when I hover over the plus sign, it says add scene. So I could literally create this as a scene that I can then switch to if I want to, so that I'm not having to do the whole clicking and dragging thing, because that could get tedious. I could just have just a vocal scene, and then I could go back and I could, let's say I could just want just a brass scene. That's fine. Okay, let's hide all of those, and there we go. We just got the tenor track, the tenor solo track, and the horn section tracks. Cool. Now I can just deal with just those. And I can turn everything back on. Just like that. So yeah, so you can certainly do that. And that's easy enough to do. So I hope that helps you out there, Sheila. Let's go and have another scroll down. And we're going to call it a night very, very soon, folks. I think we've got to the end of the questions anyway, I think. Let's have a look. Is there an easy way to scroll tracks from left to right, not grabbing the little slider with the mouse? Is there a keyboard shortcut? Sheila says, I use my big silver knob on the fader port 8. Yep, you can certainly do that. Let's see. Deer Creek says, of course you can hide channels. Too tedious though. Screenshots is a good feature, or whatever it's called. Yeah, scenes I think is what you're referring to, Chris. And yeah, it's a fantastic feature. If you don't want to see everything and you want to just have everything at a one-click button rather than, you know, hiding stuff like I was showing you, you can just add scenes. That's easy enough to do. Very, very easy to set up, and you can title each scene. I think actually Jonny has a video on setting mixer scenes on his channel, so go and have a look for that and watch that, because he actually deals with it very, very thoroughly, shows you how to do it and everything else. And you know, it's kind of beyond the scope of this particular show, But I could certainly make a video out of that if you wish. That would be easy enough. So I think I've got to the end of your questions. Dear Chris says, a year later, I'm still transferring from Cakewalk and actually liking Studio One much more. Well, there you go. That's cool. Fantastic. I like that. That's very cool. So there you go. I hope this has all been a helpful show for you and a little look at doing mixer templates in Studio One and how I like to set up a mix. I hope you found that insightful and useful. And the next time you see me, folks, will be on Wednesday. I believe we're still doing Songwriting Simplified on Wednesday this week, unless there is something else that clashes with that. Oh, yes. Thank you for the reminder there, Sheila. I was just about to sign off, and you reminded me to answer your question. What are your top 5 frequently used plugins? That's a great question. I use the Pro EQ extensively. I use the SSL channel strips from Waves. I use them a lot because I am that kind of a guy. I use the SPL de-esser from Plugin Alliance. Use that a lot. I use the Klanghelm MJUC compressor a lot. Actually, these days I'm using the MJUC as a parallel compressor, and it's awesome as a parallel compressor. It's really, really good, especially with the settings on it where you can control the drive, so you can get a little bit of saturation with your parallel compression as well. That's really, really nice. Let's see. What else do I use? So I've talked about the Pro EQ, the SPL de-esser. Let's see. Oh, the Fat channel. The Presonus Fat channel. And yeah, I use a lot of the EQs and compressors in the Fat channel. The Fat channel is fantastic now. The Fat channel is what the Fat channel should have been a long time ago, and now it is. It's really, really cool. You know, you've got a load of different EQ options and a load of different compression options now, which is fantastic. And I hope that they will continue to expand what you have on offer for EQ and compression on the Fat channel. I think that would just be outstanding if they could continue to develop that. So we've got the SPL DS, we've got the Pro EQ, we've got the Fat channel. What else would I use? The room reverb and the analog delay. There you go. That's my top 5. Those are the ones that I use the most often, I would say. So I hope that has answered your question. Would setting up a multi-instrument for VSTs in a song template save on its load time? Probably not. Because you it would still have to load in. So however many instruments you have in that multi-instrument, each one of those instances still needs to load in. So the question then becomes, would you prefer those instruments to load in when you start the song, when you open the song for the first time, or when you open the song each time? Would you prefer that whole thing to take place up front, or, you know, kind of later down the line? That's then the question, really. If you are happy with those VSTIs loading in at first, then that's okay. Then you know that it's all set up and it just does it automatically. You don't have to fiddle about. Then if that's your preference, then yes. But it still has to load in. I don't know whether it would make a whole lot of difference in terms of load in time. I think they are always going to load in. They're always going to take a certain equal amount of time every time to load in, I think is what I'm trying to say. It's 1:15 in the morning and I'm starting to lose the will here. But I do want to make sure I get your questions Ken says, question from before, can you give a brief overview on how to use delay reverb to add depth, bring instruments or voice further to the front or the back? I'll try and answer that real brief. This could be made a future show. I'll tell you what, why don't we tackle that next week, Ken? Why don't we make ambient effects the focus for next week? That's a great idea. Ken, could you send me an email to remind me of that, please? I would appreciate that. And then I will make sure that that is the focus for next week's show. I think that's a great idea because I don't think I could do it justice in a couple of minutes. I think it would be a better idea if we just took our time over how different effects put elements of your mix further back in the mix or further forward. So yeah, we could certainly cover that. And how you can use reverbs and delays strategically to bring things forward or to push things back. Compression has the same, can certainly help as well there. So we can kind of do all of that, I think, in next week's show. So yeah, please do email me about that, Ken, please, and I'll make sure to look at that. Deer Creek says, I'll keep my mouth shut about personas, but they need to give you more coffee mugs. Coffee mugs would be nice. Okay, well, I think I'm going to call it there, guys, because I think we'll get to Ken's question at the start of, we'll make that the focal point of next week's show. If I have missed your questions tonight, folks, please do email me. And I will address your questions in a separate video. And I will post it up on the YouTube channel as well. So yeah, so if I've missed a question, please do email me and we'll get that in to a video. I'm totally cool with doing that. Okay, folks, I'm going to call it there and I'm going to say a very big thank you to everybody for coming out. Could somebody please post number of viewers, please? That would be cool if somebody could do that. And yeah, Ken, please don't forget to drop me that email. That way I remember to make your question the focal point for next week's show. So somebody, 16 currently. Okay, so okay, we dropped down a wee bit, and I'll go and look at peak views. But I think we probably peaked around about 25 or 26, which is all right, not too bad. Thank you everybody for watching. And for contributing with wit, with wisdom, with questions, and the hilarious chat at the start of the show was fantastic. That was very cool. That's very cool. I appreciate all the chat about all things Scottish. So I do appreciate all of that, folks. Thanks very much for the entertainment and for really, really cracking questions. So I hope that all of the information that we've gone over and the demonstrations that I've done tonight have been helpful. And please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you will absolutely get a notification about when the Paper Deity mixing series starts and when those videos start going up. They are going to be every week, folks. So as I say on the first video in the description, you will have a link to the Dropbox folder where you can get the stems so you can mix Paper Deity along with me or at your own pace, whichever you prefer. It's a fun tune to mix. It's got issues of its own, which you will have to tackle to make this sound really, really good. So enjoy it, and I will mix this right in front of your very eyes. And I will try and make it as engaging as I possibly can, and I will try and make it as helpful as I possibly can. And you'll get an insight into how I actually mix, because I realize that I've not really shown you guys how I actually mix. I've talked about mixing a lot, but never actually shown you how I actually mix. So that's kind of why I'm doing this. So I hope you find it helpful, and I will see you. Oh, Johnny Guy with a $15 donation. I just spied out the corner of my eye. Thank you so much for that, Johnny. I appreciate that, mate. And I will see everybody on Wednesday over at Johnny's channel for another insightful educational, informative, and hilarious episode of Songwriting Simplified. So until then, folks, bonsoir, bon nuit, good night.
This morning, turned on the smart TV. There's a waxen lady praising her paper deity, and a man in a toupee with Texas Hold'em eyes. It's dollar signs for paradise. Of hairspray, diamond encrusted shoes, strutting across the platform like she's escaped from the zoo. Cut to the man with the toupee and Texas Hold'em eyes. It's dollar signs for paradise. Persuasion, reverse psychology, leaves a viewer spellbound, screwed their credit history. He's the man with the toupee and Texas Hold'em eyes. It's dollar signs for paradise. Mm-hmm.